Yum, yum!
Hello, this is Pascal. So today I'm going to show you how to rig this door. So you have at the end one control to open the door, push the handle, say hi to Carlos. I think his name is Carlos. I'm not sure. And you can stretch the door left and right, change the middle part, and move the whole setup. And while you stretch, you're not stretching the textures. And for that, we'll go through a number of interesting Modo features and a few quirks, especially for the textures. This is all based on deformers. There's no hierarchy, no bones. So let's get started. So this is my door, and I have assigned it a simple wood texture that is stylable in V. I don't need to move it to the side, so it's just stylable in V. Turn that off. And it's separated in several pieces. So if you can see, this is the door, just the main body of the door. I have the molding at the bottom and the molding at the top, the slats, an inset, which is what's holding the window frame here, the window itself, the glass, just a sheet of glass inside here, the door handle, the door frame. There's also one hinge there. We'll deal with the hinges later. And the baseboard, and then there's also a wall which we'll also deal with at the end. Alright, so talking about the door, just want to show you it's UV'd. So all the pieces are lined up properly and they're all facing the wood fiber direction. So you can see here. And all the wood pieces have the same material here. First, I'm going to set up my environment. So bring up my rigging tools here and bring up my schematic view. And if you don't see it, just click on this little icon here and choose schematic from the list. So we're going to use weight containers. And weight containers are great because they're not bound to a mesh, so you keep your assembly. But you have to set them up manually, and I'll explain why. So let me start with an example with the door here. I'm going to go to vertices. I'm just going to select this side here. And I can go in my deformers tab here. I can go create weight container. And you can see, because I have this selected, that you can see the weight has been assigned. So that's perfect. Here's my weight container, and I can see it in my vertex maps list, weight container, and I can right click on it, add a transform effector, and then when I select the effector, I move my points, which is perfect. But the way it's set up in the schematic, if I bring my two items here in my schematic view, weight container also, here it is. Okay, if I double click on the connection, I get my influence, which is great. And if I double click on the geometry here, this is what it looks like. So door is connected to the weight container, and the door is also connected to the item door, is also connected to the general influence here. and it works as you've seen, but the issue is that if I choose then another mesh like the window here, and I add points to the container, so I select my points, select the container, add points. You can see in the weight container here my points have been added, and you can see it with the weight map here also, but the transform effector doesn't affect the points because it hasn't been added to the influence here. The way it's set up here is all wrong. The way it should be is like this. So now when I move everything with it. So when we do our setup, we're going to do it manually to avoid that issue. So since we've already added the points on the right side of the door here, we're going to keep going. So I've added the, I'm going to move first this whole side, which can move left and right. So I'm going to add all these meshes, not the slats yet. Inset, the window is already done. Then glass, handle, door frame, and baseboard. And select all the points using the middle mouse to select through. Select my weight container, add points. And just to check everything is properly assigned. I'm going to turn that off. And let's create the weight container for the left side. So I'm going to select my door, molding, all these items, vertex, mode, select all those, create weight container, and drag it here. I can hide these nodes. And I'm going to add a general influence. So go here, type influence. And you can see it's already been assigned to the wrong way also. I really don't know why that is, so I'm going to remove that link. And there's no way to add the general influence without having it connected to a mesh already. Not that I could find anyway, so if someone knows, let me know. So since I don't want to have to redo that disconnection several times, I'm going to duplicate this one a couple of times just to keep it around. Alright, so I have my weight container, I have my general influence, and now I'm going to add a locator. Drag it in here, and in setup mode I'm going to make my connection. And now I can move my points. So we're going to change the position of those locators later because I want them in a specific place on the mesh. So the next step is put the locators in the right position. So I have to think ahead here, because this is going to help me control the position of those crossbars on the window. So I'm actually going to select the window and isolate it, see how it is. I need my controller to be exactly like from this edge here, but also need to add the same distance there is here from the for the crossbar, if you know what I mean. I'm going to need to measure the third of that exact distance. So I need to compensate for the thickness of that piece here. So I'm going to front view, select my measure tool, doesn't have to be to the micron. Yeah, so 9.52 millimeters. Go back here. Now I'm gonna, go back to my edge mode. One edge selected, so I'm going to assign the work plane to my selection, Shift A to make sure it's there. And now I'm going to select my right side locator. In the setup tab, I'm going to go to align to work plane position, except I have to do it, of course, in setup mode. Here we go. And now I can reset the work plane. And my locator is in the right place, but I need to subtract my 9.52 millimeters. There we go. So now my deformer moves from the right place. So I'm going to repeat the same operation. I don't want this to be too long, so see you in a bit. Okay, so I have my 4 locators in the right place. So I really repeated the same process, and they're all offsetted by 9.52 millimeters on X for those two, and on Y for those two. Just to make things easier, I'm going to go into the locator properties, change the shape to circle, non-solid, and make it maybe 0.2, too small, 0.4, So now we can start moving on to the window. Okay, so for the window, I'm going to create a new workspace, call it window, just to have a clean setup. And I'm going to move that node to that new workspace, and you can see all your workspaces by clicking to this on this icon, because it already has a, so this one, oops, this one I'm going to call sides. I don't like the 2, so I'll go those bars. Alright. So first I need to create some new weight containers for each of the bars. So let's do that quickly. Okay, so let's drag all this to the schematic. Let's start with this one. I'm going to duplicate this 4 times. It won't let me, I don't know why. Okay, so now we need to add the locators, and this time I'm going to show you a different way of doing it. We're going to go a little faster. I'm going to use a kit by Cristobal Villa, and he has many kits that you should absolutely have. Go check out his site, like Eteria Studios, I think it's called, and get all the kits. So this one, you can just, without going through the whole work plane process, you can just select one edge, click on this button, it's going to add a locator right there. So I'll go through the 4 sides. Add my locators, and you can directly from here also, these are all my new locators, change the shape. So you have circle, plane, and cube here. I'm just going to switch to sphere. You have to go down there to uncheck solid. And we can even change the color to red for the wireframe. Here we go. I'm going to put this to the side. So now I'm going to add my locators in the schematic. So this one is assigned to vertical right. Change the name again. I know it's not fun to watch, but we have to rename everything. So you don't get lost. Go into setup mode and connect all the locators to their influence. Okay, let's check that everything works. Yes. And what I'm going to do is that for these two, make sure I'm going to go to the channels tab, and I want to lock the position Z and X and Y. And this one, I want to lock position X and Z. Okay, so let me clean up my workspace first. I don't need the deformers and I don't need the weight containers. I do need all those controllers. Okay, and for the what's going to control the x-axis, I need to add that channel to the schematic. For those, I need to add the y to the schematic. Then the other thing I need to do is to zero all the positions. Here we go. So now each of the items has a zero position and a position. The zero position is stored as the one that was in the scene before. If I go into setup mode, those two are reversed. So my position is now what it was in the scene, and my position 0 is 0. So that's what we're going to use. I'm going to start with the top and the bottom here. So I need to subtract the top position to the middle position. So I'm going to add a math subtract. Yeah. I need to divide that by 3. Divide by 3. And then I need to subtract the top position. I need to subtract that distance we found here from the top position. So I need to add another subtract. Subtract the 3. Now look at the result. The result is 1.9418. If I look at the position of this controller, it is 9301. So when I plug this in, it's not going to match, which is normal. The mesh is not evenly spaced on purpose, obviously, because you may not have that option, or maybe slightly off and you don't know it, or you didn't make it, whatever. So we need to correct that offset. So the way to correct that is actually to correct it in the 0 position here. And we're going to copy that, so 1.9418. Oh, sorry. Go back to the channel here. That's the position Y, sorry. So 1.9418 minus 1.9301, except we need to make it minus, not plus. And then connect that position here. And when I come out of the setup mode, this is correct, but I need to re-offset the position back to where it should be. So I'll go back here. Let me recheck the 1.9418. Go to my channels here and change the position 0 to 1.9418. And now it's exactly in the right position. So I'm going to go back to setup to do the bottom one. I need to get that same value here, but this time I need to add it to this position. My result here is here result is 1.6022. So my offset should be 1.6022 minus 1.6039, and this time should be positive, and put that in. Come out of setup and then rechange my Y position here to 1.6022. So now when I move these controllers, everything stays evenly spaced. And since I have my 0 position, I can do reset position and I go back to my setup. So now we're going to do the exact same thing for the vertical bars, and I'm just going to go ahead and do it and see you in the next video. So I'm done with the vertical bars, and as it happened, they were actually properly placed to start with, so I didn't have to correct any offsets. So now when I show the whole door, everything works properly. Select them and reset position. Here we go. Now there's one more thing I need to do, which is take care of this panel here, and we'll do the hiding of the sides later. But right now, if I move the side here, it works fine, but I want this panel to always stay centered. Right now, if I move it to this distance, it's not coherent. So that's pretty simple to do, and we don't even have to go to setup mode. So, but we do need to create another weight container, sorry. Put that down and call it slats all. And I just need the I need to add the points maybe. So add points, and then this time I'm just going to be lazy and add a transform effector, which is going to be right in the middle, which suits me fine. So I'm going to add that to the schematic, so just make sure it works as expected. Yes, it does. And now I need to get this distance again. So I need to get this number again, but this time, so I'm going to add a divide here, and I need to get this distance divided by 2. Control slats here, I need to add my X position. And I'm gonna log Y and Z. And since it's all, this position is all 0 at X, there is no 0 position needed. I can just plug in my node here, and now when I move my controller, the slats always stay centered. So I'm going to actually hide this controller because I don't need, not this one, the, what is it? This one, I don't need to see it. Just going to do some cleanup also, put all my containers together. Alright, so now the fun part, let's talk about the textures. So, how to rig the textures? First thing to notice is that I'm just going to solo the door here as a sample. So here's my UVs, very nice UVs, I would say. But so if I move my controllers right now, the textures are going to stretch as you would expect, which is normal. So I want them to stay where they are, or at least don't stretch. Now the thing to notice is that if you go in the shader tree and select your wood texture, that's you have your texture locator with your UV settings here. Notice when I change the horizontal wrap here, I'm just going to make it bigger. Notice in the UV window, maybe it's going to be easier in the vertical wrap here to see. It stretches from the middle. It doesn't stretch from the 0 point here, which would be logical. I don't understand at all why it's set up that way. So we're going to have to deal with that. And the first thing to do is that we have to change our UVs. And you have to do that in setup mode because there are already some deformers attached to the mesh. And if you don't do that, you're going to crash. So there are two things we need to make sure of. And one I already took care of, but the other not. So we have to make sure that all the mesh parts are centered, because in on V here, because we're going to stretch texture, because we're stretching them up and down here following the fibers. And the other thing we need to do is that we have to make sure that they're all oriented the same way. So I've already done this here, so see that all those elements are all facing the same way. Otherwise, they are going to stretch in different directions. So that's one thing to do. And then the other one is then we have to center this. So we're going to use one of Cristobal's wonderful scripts. Again, I'm going to go to this Swiss knife. Oh no, not this one, sorry. That's for later. I'm going to use his UV tools here, where you have some align tools. And we want V-center. And what you need to do now is activate symmetry. Make sure grid is selected. Go closer here like this. And then center your UVs. Okay, so that's one thing, but that doesn't address the stretching, which we're going to do now. So let me move that aside. Now that the UVs are properly laid out, let's do the rigging. So I created a new workspace called Textures, and I'm going to bring in my door. And I need to decide what's the relationship between that door and my UVs. So go back to the wood texture here, the texture locator. So this is my rest position, and that position gives me my 1 for the UV. So I'm going to need to bring in my vertical wrap here. And I need to know exactly what the dimensions of my mesh are, which is what you would find here with the dimension tool. I click on the door here, I get all my dimensions. So to get that, I need to add the mesh info node and plug it in there. And I'm going to just get rid of what I don't need. I don't even need the size X and the size Z. I just need the size Y. So that's my 1, so I need it to make. So I need to make it 1, meaning I want to divide this, which is 2.4384 by itself. So I'm going to add a math node. 2.4384 divided by 2.4384. So that's my vertical wrap. Like this. So now when I move my controller, see there's no more stretching. It's stretching on X because we haven't dealt with that yet, but just looking at the Y, it doesn't stretch, but it moves. So how to fix that? We need to bring in also the V-tile offset. As it moves from the center, we have to find the percentage to offset the vertical wrap width. Now this is a trial and error. I found that, because you'll see when we do the other parts of the door, that number changes. And I honestly don't have an explanation why. You just have to try different things. So I'm just going to add divide, make it multiply, change the size here, multiply by 0.2, plug it into offset V, and now when I move my controller, texture doesn't move. Okay, so that's one part done. Now we're going to have to do separate setups for each of the pieces that have a similar one reference. So they all have the same material, but we're going to use selection sets, and for each selection set we're going to assign a new wood texture with a separate locator, and that is what we're going to rig here. So let's start with the slats to make it simple. I'm going to get my mesh here, select all the polygons, go to selection sets, new set, name slats. Alright. Then in my shader tree, I'm going to add a group, polygon tag, selection set, and slats. And I'm going to add a new wood texture, so that same one. So it now has a new texture locator here. And I'm actually going to rename the locators immediately. And if you don't see the locators here, you have to go to the filter and make sure that it's checked. It's unchecked by default because it clutters the UI otherwise. So that's my first one, so I'll call it locator door long. So all these parts here. And here, locator slats. So this way I won't get lost. Close that. So now in my schematic, I need to add slats. I'm going to duplicate this node again. Write this mesh instead. Again, remove what I don't need. Right, so I want my size Y again, and I need my new wood texture here, texture locator, unchecked UV, and I need to add the vertical wrap and UV tile offset, add to schematic. So I have my two locators, and add the divide. So my mesh info here, so it says my size Y, and to divide it by itself, 0.7328. Plug that into my vertical wrap and add my multiply, and I'm going to try 0.1. I think that's what it was. Let's check that out. So it seems about correct, but what's going on is what I told you about, which is that the UVs are not properly laid out. So some of the textures move up, some move down, they don't move at the same speed. So I need to change my UVs also. So I'll go to setup mode to avoid issues, which we might still have. bring in Etherea's UV tools. And I'm first going to distribute those horizontally. And I need to set in polygon mode. Here we go. I'm going to move this up. And now I need to center them. I'm going to bring this back. It doesn't really matter where they are in the UV space, just for reference. And now turn on snapping. And center them on V. Now these two, actually we're not going to see those, so it doesn't really matter where they are. I just center them also. But okay. So hide this, get out of setup. Let's look at the stretching. It's still moving. It's still moving a little. And the reason why now we thought we had fixed this, it looks like it's moving again. It's because the groups are not properly assigned. So that wood texture needs to be in the slats here. And I need to actually add another group door long, because we need to also Windows door long, and that one needs to have a selection set, so we'll go do that after. I just want to check this one first. So it's still moving a tiny bit, so let's try 0.2 also. Let's see. At 0.2, there's it moves a tiny bit, but it's barely noticeable. Let's try 0.25. That's too much. 0.15. Still moving. Uh, 0.21 seems like let's try 0.22. It's in between, but it's getting very. Alright, that looks pretty good to me. So we're going to leave it like that. Now we need to create several selection sets. So let's look at the door here. My first selection set is all the long polygons here that are measured in Y. So I don't need the top one. I don't need those bottom ones either. So that's a new selection set. Door long, and now this group needs to assign to section set door long. Okay. Then I need to select all those middle pieces here, so I can select my door here. Hang on, select door long, I'm going to hide it, select all those, and those are going to be controlled by the X size. So add a new set, door wide. It's going to take some time to get everything set up, but I think it's worth going through a couple more. So add group, section set, door wide, add the wood texture again, rename this. So I don't have a reference because the whole item is the whole mesh is that door. So I need to create one. So I'm just going to loop select this, copy, create a new mesh and call it ref wide and paste. Now you can see it doesn't have a plus, so I need to reassign the points also to the various mesh containers. So select the right vertices here, go to my right side, deformers, add points, select those, left side, add points, and that whole piece needs also to be added to the middle. Okay, and I can hide it. I mean, to see it, but I'm going to bring it in my schematic. I just need to bring the mesh, please. There we go. Add mesh info. I'll do the cleanup later. And I need the size X here connected to my texture locator, so that's this one. And I need vertical wrap and detail offset HR to schematic. So now add divide, size X 0.7892. So that's my 1. And add my divide, multiply. I'm going to find out. Let's try with 0.1 again. So let's see. I move this. Hey, look, that looks pretty good. Moves tiny bit. Yeah, 0.15 looks pretty good. Moves a tiny bit, but the main point is that there's no stretching, so it matters only when you animate, and then when you're moving it doesn't show it. The difference is so minimal. Okay, so reset position. Collapse all those. So now this white reference is also relevant for my molding the bottom and top and the inset, because they're all based on that distance. Well, maybe not the inset. So, but definitely the moldings that are. See, the slant starts exactly at the same size as that middle piece here. So I'm going to go to polygons, select top molding, bottom, all those, go to section set, door wide. I'm going to add to set. Looks like I didn't select everything. Right, add to set. Okay. So now when I move this, it's the same. If I move the left side, the wood texture follows, but if I move the right side, it stays in place. Mostly still moving a little. Let me see. If I do 0.2. Oh, here we go. That's better. So 0.2 also. So let's reset those positions. And now I need the molding vertical, and I need to do the inset horizontal and vertical. So I'm just going to do that and see you in the next video. Alright, so I'm done with all my selection sets and my rigging of the textures here. See, at the end I have 7 section sets. And the only one that needed a specific mesh reference was the middle part here. Otherwise, all the moldings are here. I use 0.2, which seemed to work for most of the textures, and now our door is getting there. So if you want to add textures after that, if you want to have like a PBR setup, if you want to add your normal, your roughness map, you're going to need to drag it from your clip browser here, and then so it's going to create a new locator for that texture, and then you're going to need to make sure it is assigned to the same locator as the original one that we've rigged here. And I would even, after that, when you're done, delete all the bad locators so you don't have any confusion. So each texture inside each group should have the same texture locator. So I also wanted to texture the glass, and I have this normal map I imported, and I have the same exact setup. So normal map is just set as a diffuse map for now, and I brought in my glass info, and I want to tile in X in a U and V at the same time. And I found, after quite a bit of trying, so I found the multipliers be 0.48 in X and 0.47 in Y, and so my texture doesn't move, or barely. I'm sure there's some kind of formula somewhere that you can apply it to. But now I would like to tile the texture, because that texture is too big, and very often those texture on windows are very small. So that's actually very simple. I just need to multiply everything by 3. That's a multiply, and I'll duplicate it. Four times. I just need to plug in everything. So I need to plug this here. No. This. That. This. That. So now my texture is tiled, and it just stays in its place. And if you want to expose exactly the tiling, you can add another node. That should be your channel, and then that you plug into each of the multiply. So now if it's like this, and the channel here, bring up my channel hole, I can change my tiling. The hinges are, right now I have only one, so it's one item, but one part is stuck to the frame and one part is stuck to the door, and you also have like an axis in the middle which will assign to either side. It doesn't really matter. So now I need to duplicate it 2 times on Y. But first, before I do that, I'm going to go into item mode. You'll see that my center is at the origin, and I want it to be exactly in the middle of the my hinge here. So I'm going to go to polygons. I'm going to hide this part and select these polygons here, unhide, and I'm going to use yet another of Cristobal's kits. Go to that Swiss knife. This is the button here. It's going to put the center in the middle of my selection. So click on it, close it now, and when I go in the item mode, you'll see my pivot, my center is exactly where I want it to be, because it's where the rotation is going to be based on. So now that I have my hinge properly set up, I can duplicate it. So I'm going to duplicate, clone. I need 2 clones. Click in the interface. This way I know they're properly spaced out. And the bottom goes, well, let's say, around here. So now I have three hinges, except the other two are at the bottom here. Bring them back up. Okay. Let's rename them. You notice select renaming. Alright, so what I want, this hinge at the bottom is always going to stay there. That doesn't move. The stretching happens only above. This one is going to follow that controller, and this one I always want, like the slats in a way, in the middle of the other two. So first of all, I still need to create weight containers. So for the first hinge, I'm going to my setup, powers, create weight containers. So that's hinge top, hinge middle, three, hinge bottom, and I need to create a controller exactly at the right place for those items. And what I can do is bring back my quick locators here, and because the item is selected and it already has the right center, I can just add my locator here. It's going to be exactly where I need it. Same thing here, add locator. Here, add locator. I'm going to select my three locators, change the box, uncheck solid, and size 0.05. Color, let's do it blue, 0.06. Okay, and now I need to redo my little rigging setup. So I'm going to speed that up. Okay, so I have my three controllers now. And I'm going to clean up that workspace. I don't need those anymore. So I'm first going to bring my door in the schematic here, and also zero the position of my three controllers. So now, since I'm in zero position, I'm going to go into setup mode, and I need to add my mesh info here. Get rid of those again. Oops. Get rid of those. Okay. And I'm going to the size Y, and I want to control the position of the first hinge relative to the height of the door. So that's totally up to you. I'm just going to add a subtract here, my size Y, and here my position Y. Oh, that's not the one I want. I want this one. Here we go. So I need to decide exactly where I want it to be. Trying to match about what I have. Say 0.2. So now I need to correct my position here, since the result here is 2.384 and my original position is 2.533. I need to change the position 0 from 2.2533 minus 2.2384. Right, now we're back to normal. Okay. Now I need, for this bottom controller, I need its position Y, and I need also its world position. Same here, world position, because that's what we're going to use to measure the distance. And there's a note for that. You can measure distance. And measure distance measures in the 3D space. So if your items are, if there's an offset in Y and X, it's just going to measure the exact distance in 3D. But since our 3 controllers are all lined up, we can measure the distance this way. So position from to position 2. That shows you the distance, and I need to divide it by 2. And I need to add to that my Y position for the bottom hinge. But since we are in setup, I need to invert the 0 and the other position. So Control X, Control V, otherwise I get 0. I'm going to plug that into my Y position. So notice it's 12733. And my output here is 12733. So everything is fine. I exit setup. And everything goes away. Why is that? Because this one has 2 positions now, so it needs to go back to 0. And that one needs to go back to 2659 minus 2733. So 1.2659 minus 1.2733. And now we're all good. So when I move my door up and down, the hinges follow properly. So that deformer is going to be, this is my deformer list. I'm going to move my weight containers at the bottom. Those three need to happen at the very end because they are based on the word position. Even though we're going to move also them with the rest of the door. So I still need to assign my hinges to the other controllers. So I'm going to select them like this. Go to vertex, select all my vertices, and then go to my left side. Where is it? Container and add points. And these I can move up. So now I'm going to move my left side. The hinges follow, and with my setup they go up and down properly. We can start thinking about those bottom panels here. So that's going to be a very simple process actually. So I'm going to add a new mesh, and in that mesh I'm just going to add two cubes that I'm going to use as cutouts for the slats. So here's one, and just copy it over. I could have used symmetry, but why? Okay, so those are going to move with the rest of the door, so I need to rename this. I need to assign the vertices to the various weight containers. So top goes to the top, back to my deformer, add points. This part here to the right side, and this part here to the left side. Just checking to make sure that they move properly. Yes. Okay, and then what I need to do now simply is to select my slats mesh, and I'm going to add an operator. It's going to be a Boolean. So double click, driver surface. I want my, where is it? Cut slats, subtract. Here we go, and then I can hide my cutting mesh, and now when I move my panels, it's all hidden. Will follow. Excellent. So now we can actually do the same thing for the wall. I'm also going to have a new mesh. Create another cube. Here we go. Aim that hole. Select my wall. Add operator. Boolean. And get it with the hole. Now I hide it. And I have my opening. Now I want to open the door. So I'm selecting this controller here, and I'm going to use crystal balls kit again. Add a locator there, and I'm going to make it a circle on the Y. And non-solid. And that's going to be my control to open the door. And I want it at 0 on Y. And I drag it into my new open door workspace. So now, you guessed it, we are going to create a new weight container. And I need all the door items. So the window, start over here. Reference, the door molding. Oops, I pressed the I by mistake. Here we go. And I don't want the door frame. And I want the inset. And I also want to be in setup mode so I can see all of the so I can grab everything, because otherwise the booleans are going to hide the vertices on the slats at the bottom. So go to vertex mode, select everything and create weight container. Get out of vertex mode. Here it is. Door all up, put it in the schematic, and usual process. I'm going to add general influence, and you see that issue here. It's because my influence is after the hinges, and it needs to be before. So now I get all that. I don't want those connections. This is what I want. And remove those nodes. Okay, so now I can hide that those two meshes. Get into setup mode and connect my effector. Check that everything works. correctly. It's good, except I can see that my cutout is not actually correct. It needs to be closer, needs to be inside the door, not the door frames. I move this here and move that side here. And the door opens fine. And now we need to add the hinges, so only isolate that, only the side that's attached to the door moves. So that's this one, and this one. Select my container, add points, and it works fine. Everything works as expected. And one more thing I want to animate is the door handle. So I'm going to select it and isolate it. So I want to rotate those. Let me go into reflection to get a better idea. So I want to rotate the handles only. So I'm going to select those edges. Hello, Cristobal. Add a locator. I don't really care what the shape is. And yes, select all those polygons, create weight container, handle, schematic, control handle, actually I do want to change the shape just so I see it better. Alright, and add general influence. This here, setup mode, control, okay, and then this. Move the handle. And when I think of it, deactivate those rotation axes. There's another thing on the handle is that I would like, when the door closes, I would like to push the latch inside. So for that, we're going to create a morph map. So in the morph map, I'm going to create a new map. I'm going to say latch in, and I'm going to select these polygons, go into setup mode, and just move them in. Then I can add move influence, which is another deformer, and you can see it's the 100%, and you see it here. Move that up there. So now the latch is all the way in, but we're going to control it with the opening of the door. So I also want to be able to move everything. So I'm going to go into setup mode and select all the meshes. Make sure they're all visible and get all my vertices. Create a weight container. And that is a little taxing on the system with all those. Okay, so I had a crash when I was creating the container, but it looks like it worked anyway when I saved got the file back. So let me see. If that worked out. I put it in the open door. Don't have too much in here. Drag it in. So I'm going to hide my reference and the cut and the hole. There we go. That's the morph for the handle, and I can't, if I make it invisible, it disable it. So what I need to do is go in the channel list and visible, no, it's still enabled. Okay, let me check my deformers list. So the latch needs to be all the way at the beginning, and that's the transform for the handle, I believe. So I'll say rotate handle. That should also be at the very beginning before all the other transformations happen. And that goes there. Alright, so now I need to add a locator at the bottom. Shape plane, solid, Y. I make it 1.5. And call it master. Bring it in here. Add my influence. Here we go. Setup mode. Oh, here we go again. The formula list, yeah, needs to be. That's the last. I'll call it a move all. That's the last deformer, everything happens and then you can move things. So here we go. Geometry, set mode, effector. So now this I can move. Oh, I didn't include the window. Effector at points. Move the door and open it. Okay, so we're getting very close now. The last thing to do is to create controls, especially for the opening of the door, because I want to control, I want to clamp the rotation of the door so it doesn't go past the 0, and I want to control the opening, the pushing of the handle and the latch. So let's do that now. I prepared a few things here. So I have a locator which we're going to use to set up all the controls and all the things I want to drive, which are the opening of the door, the pushing of the handle, the latch, and then the right side, the top, the mid, and the master for the whole position. I'm not going to move this side because then I'm offsetting my rotation. So I'm just going to be able to move this right side here. So let's start creating our channel. So right click on your locator and add a user channel. So the first one I want to create is the opening of the door. So I'm going to call it open door. Type is an angle. Mode scalar, default value is going to be -20, and you'll see why in a second. And I'm going to use a minimum and a maximum. So minimum 120 and maximum, that's the opening of the door, let's do 150. Okay, so now I want to connect this to that rotation. I'm going to add a channel relationship. I'm plugging my open door into my rotation. I'm going to click on the title here, get this little interface. I'm going to bring up the graph, which is easier to deal with than these buttons here. So at 0, so you already have a keyframe. At 0, my value is 0, and I want that at 150, my value is 150. Zoom out here, make my keys straight, because I want to control the easing of the door opening by keying the channel. Right, so before 0 it's at 0, and after 150 it stays at 150. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to check it. Select your channel, press C to bring up channel hole. Set the default value of -20, so before -20 nothing happens, and then at 0 the door opens to 150. Okay, so now the handle. I'm going to add a new channel relationship controlled by the same channel here to the handle rotation. I'm going to bring in my graph again, and this time, so I'm going to start at a little after 120, so it's at 0, and a little before 0, I want the handle to go down. Just do like this, and then after a while it's gonna go back up to 0, and I'm gonna leave the ease in out here. Alright, so let's check it. Handle goes down, door opens, handle goes back up. All good. And then I'm gonna duplicate this channel relationship because I want to keep the keyframes. So I'm gonna duplicate it and plug it into the strength of the morph map. Create my graph, and I want these to go up to 100. And a little trick on in the graph editor here, if you middle click on a key, it's going to constrain it to the up and down axis. Okay, so let's check this. -20, it's fall in, and then goes in with the door handle and goes back out again. Okay, so that's all working well with the opening of the door. So next I want to control the right side here, but remember we set all that up in the setup mode. So I'm going to go back there. I'm going to check that the position here, which is that value. So I'm going to copy it and then create a new user channel. I'm going to say slide right. So type is going to be distance, mod scalar, and for default value I'm going to add that position we just copied. And then I also want to use a minimum value because I don't want the stretching to go farther than the size of the slats at the bottom. So that adjacent 740 millimeters. It's okay. So now I'm going to connect my channel to the right side position, and I have to make sure it's in millimeters, not meters, so it's all matching. And then when I leave setup, you see the door moves to the right, and I have to go back here and put it back to 0. And now when I bring up my channel, I can move the door and it goes back to 0 at the 0 position. So I'm going to do the same thing now for the top and the middle. So for the top, same thing, we're going to go into setup mode. I'm going to check my position, copy it, and then create a new user channel. Correct. And door up, type distance, default value, and I'm just gonna ignore those for now. So now I can plug in my control. It's okay. Leave setup and go to 0. But next the middle, so Still the same thing. Check the Y position here. Copy it. Add user channel. Add. So middle. Distance scalar. That's the distance and leave that off. No, I don't want that. Okay. And plug it in. Exit setup. Go back to 0. And then the last one is the master. So I want to move the on X. So one more user channel. Master, distance, scalar, default value 0. And for that I don't need to be in setup mode. I can just plug it in. Alright, so the last thing to do is when I select my controls, go to the assembly and the command, I'm going to select item channel hall. So each time I click on the locator, I get all my controls. And everything works fine. Go back to 0 here, everywhere. Okay, so that's it. Let me unhide everything. The wall and the frame. And there you go. So that was pretty long. It's my longest tutorial ever. Sorry if I rambled and I mumbled, and I apologize for the sound. It's not the best quality. I had some issues with that, but I hope you learned a few things. I did learn a lot when I started working on that type of project, but it shows you the flexibility of the software and what you can do with it. Alright, bye bye.
Yum, yum!